Hi everyone, welcome back to the channel. If you're new here, I'm MJ. I'm a non-binary and autistic science fiction and fantasy author, and this channel is about the craft of writing with a neurodivergent and queer focus. Happy New Year! We're officially in 2026, for better or for worse, and if you're on WriterTube right now, you're probably seeing a lot of planning content. Everyone's got the system that will fix your productivity, the planner that will change your life, the method that works for everyone. And here's the truth. There is no one-size-fits-all planning system. What works for neurotypical brains might be a disaster for an ADHD brain. What works for one autistic person might be completely wrong for another autistic person. Today, I want to talk about different planning approaches, why they work for different brains, and how to figure out what your brain actually needs. I struggled with disorganization through school. It wasn't until I had children and somehow I had to figure out how to manage 3 children with executive functioning difficulties with my own executive functioning difficulties. I turned to planners, slowly over time developing a system that works for me and realizing when I need to adjust the system because my brain needed novelty. What I have learned over the years is that there's no single best approach, and usually I have to combine multiple approaches to be successful because traditional planning systems are not made for neurodivergent brains. Here's what those systems assume: that you can accurately estimate how long tasks take. Time blindness says no. You have consistent energy levels every day. Energy fluctuations say no. That rigid schedules are motivating and not anxiety-inducing. Executive functioning says no. You can maintain focus on annual goals for 12 months straight. Neurodivergent brains say no. Failure to stick to the plan means you are not trying hard enough. Ableism says, well, you get the idea. So, if traditional planning hasn't worked for you, it's not because you're broken, it's because the system wasn't built for your brain. The solution? Find a system that is built for how your brain works. So the first thing to consider is what time frame works for your brain. As we go through these, please know that these are not mutually exclusive. Some people may only use one time frame for planning, and others, like myself, will plan using multiple time frames. So one solution is annual planning. So this is full year goals. And this tends to work for people who have very stable lives and routines, people who can maintain motivation for long periods of time, people without significant energy fluctuations, those with minimal executive dysfunction, and it doesn't tend to work for people who have ADHD. The goals are too abstract and too far away. Or those with unpredictable health or energy. Or anyone whose life circumstances change frequently. It also doesn't tend to work for people who need more frequent dopamine hits from completing things. So why does annual planning tend to fail neurodivergent brains? Well, a year is too long. December feels completely abstract when you're in January. Your brain can't connect me now with me in 12 months. Plus, if things go wrong in February, you're carrying that failure around for 10 months. Instead of annual planning, I tend to have goals for the year or a concept of how I would like my year to look. However, I do not use it for planning. It's just too long a time frame for me. At most, I will use a yearly calendar to write out dates and events I need to remember later in the year, or like if I have vending opportunities that I have to sign up for earlier in the year that occur later in the year. So another option is quarterly planning or 3-month cycles. And this tends to work better for ADHD brains because it's concrete and manageable time frame, people who have fluctuating energy or health, those who need regular refresh starts, and writers balancing multiple projects. Why does 3-month planning work? Because 3 months is concrete. You can actually visualize the end. You can get 4 fresh starts per year instead of 1. If Q1 goes sideways, Q2 is a clean slate. Plus, 4 celebrations of completing a quarter instead of 1 annual review. Sounds like a win to me. So this is what I use. It works for my autistic ADHD brain because I can actually conceptualize 3 months. Another option is monthly planning or focusing on 1 month. And this tends to work best for people who get overwhelmed by longer time frames, those with very unpredictable schedules, people in crisis or high stress situations, anyone who needs frequent check-ins. And why does it work? Well, 1 month is extremely concrete. It's close enough that you can see it, plan around it, and adjust quickly. The downside is bigger projects like writing a book are hard to track in monthly chunks. You might finish a month without feeling like you made meaningful progress on long-term goals. I do monthly planning as well. I typically break my quarterly planning into monthly chunks. This way I'm not overwhelmed by everything I need to do in a quarter. If something isn't on track at the end of the month, it also gives me time to adjust, and it stops me from thinking, oh, I have the whole quarter to do this, and pushing it off for 2 months until I try and cram everything in to the 3rd month. Other option is weekly or daily planning. And this tends to work for people who literally cannot think beyond the current week. Those in survival modes, people with severe executive dysfunction, anyone dealing with chronic illness or crisis, and people who need to break apart larger planning time periods. Why does it work? Well, it meets you where you are. If planning a quarter feels impossible, plan the week. If a week feels impossible, plan today. I do weekly planning, usually the Sunday before the next week. My weeks run Monday through Sunday. And this way I can conceptualize what my week is going to look like. I also do daily planning at the start of every day. You may not need this, but I do. If I do not do all of these different time period planning cycles, I just suddenly forget how to function as a human being. So now let's talk about the second dimension of planning, and this is the format you're going to plan in. And this one is going to be very personal to your needs. One option is paper planning. Some of the benefits of paper planning is that you get physical tactile experience, so you get a sensory satisfaction. There's no screen time, so it's helpful if you're already on screens all day. You can see everything at once. You don't have to sit and scroll or go through multiple apps. And you get the satisfaction of physically checking boxes, which is huge. You can customize a paper planner with colors, stickers, doodles. It doesn't require batteries or Wi-Fi either. Some of the drawbacks of paper planning is you can't easily rearrange or edit what you have planned. You have to carry it with you, or if you leave it at home, you have to have some sort of portable planning system to help remind you of what you're working on for that day. If you lose your planner, you lose everything. It also can be really hard to search for specific information, and it costs money to replace, print, or purchase a planner. Paper planning tends to work best for people who get distracted by digital devices, people who like seeing everything laid out visually, anyone who finds the physical act of writing satisfying, and people who like stickers. I personally use paper planning because I like having everything laid out in front of me. I like writing. It is easy to add a date into my planner in the future. I actually have 2 paper planners. I use a classic happy planner, and I also carry around a pocket notebook that I write in my daily tasks, so I have it on hand at all times. I also use this pocket planner to write any notes, and then I transfer them to the appropriate place the next day. Paper planning gives me the physical act of checking boxes, which then gives me dopamine and makes me happy. It's also something I have on me at all times, so that if I randomly forget how to function as a human being, this is a constant theme, I can just pull it out and use it. And yes, for me, the paper planner just works better than having like the notes app on my phone, at least for this aspect of planning. So let's talk about digital planning. Some of the benefits of digital planning is you can edit and rearrange easily. You can sync across multiple devices like your phone, your computer, your tablet. You can search for information. You can have reminders and notifications built in. You will never run out of pages. You can back up your task and you will never use it. You can back up your task and you will never lose it. Some of the drawbacks can be screen fatigue. It's easy to get distracted by other apps when you're going to plan. It might feel less real or less satisfying. Devices require charging and connectivity, and it just might put more obstacles in your path towards planning. Apps can be overwhelming and potentially could have too many features. So digital planning tends to work best for people who are always on their devices anyway, those who need the flexibility to rearrange constantly, people with time blindness who need reminders and alarms, anyone who loses physical objects frequently. And some popular digital options to use for planning is Notion, which is very customizable, but also very complex. I have tried multiple times to use it, and I honestly cannot really figure it out or stick to it, but that is a me thing. I know other people who absolutely love it. You could also use a Trello, which is a visual board, which is great for long-term projects. Todoist is a simple task list. Google Calendar is a time-based planning. And Obsidian, which is for detailed note takers. Also, if you do have Apple products, you do have reminders, iCal, and the Notes app all built into the ecosystem that you are already using. So you don't have to choose either paper planning or digital planning. You can also do a hybrid approach. And some people do this using both paper and digital, including myself. I make sure all appointments are added to my calendar on my phone, and I have events in my reminders app. I have alarms set to go off multiple times during the day, depending on what I need. And then I also have my paper planner and my pocket notebook planner with me at all times. And I have tried going all digital and it just doesn't work for me. I also tried going completely paper-based and I found I need at least the basics electronically. So there is no right answer. You should try both and see what your brain prefers or see what works for a balance of you. And it's okay to keep changing this up, both for the novelty of it, as well as you might just find that the system isn't quite working for you the way that it used to. So the third dimension of planning is how much structure do you need? You could use time blocking, which is a very rigid structure, and what time blocking is that you plan every hour of your day. So 9 a.m. to 10 a.m. you're going to write, 10 to 11 you're going to email, and 11 to 12 you're going to do research. And this works good for people with time awareness, which is rare in neurodivergent folks. Work with those who thrive on external structure, people who with very predictable energy levels, and anyone who doesn't have time blindness. Why it typically doesn't work for individuals with neurodivergent brains is because time blindness makes it impossible to stick to. It creates massive anxiety when you fall behind, at least for me. It doesn't account for energy fluctuations or hyperfixations or randomly spacing out and realizing 3 hours have passed. It feels rigid and punishing, and one thing running late can destroy your entire day, at which point you just give up and then it didn't work. So in case you haven't gotten the gist of it, I cannot do time blocking. I have tried so many times, but my autistic brain has severe time blindness. I'll start a task at 9 a.m., look up, and it is 2 p.m. Very rigid schedules just make me feel like I am a failure. Another option is routine-based planning. And so with this, you have routines like your morning routine, writing routines, admin routine, and night routine. But the exact timing is flexible, and the time you'll take on each task each day is flexible. So this tends to work better for people who have time blindness, those with fluctuating energy, people who need structure but not rigidity, anyone triggered by the anxiety of falling behind schedule. And this tends to work because you know what to do, just not exactly when. If the morning routine happens at 8 a.m. or 10 a.m., that's fine, it's happening. And it helps accommodate for high and low energy days. It provides structure without punishing. And this is what I use. I have a morning routine, a writing routine, an admin routine, and a night routine. And they happen in that order, but the timing is flexible. So sometimes my morning routine takes me 4 hours, and other times I get it done in an hour. So another approach is a task list approach, and this is minimal structure. So for this, you have a list of things to do, and you do them when you have the time and energy. There's no specific order, no specific timeline, and this tends to work for people who get overwhelmed by any structure, those with unpredictable schedules, people in crisis or survival mode, anyone who rebels against structure. So if you have a PPA profile, and it tends to work because it gives the maximum flexibility. There's no pressure about when things happen. You can match tasks to energy levels, and you have the freedom to prioritize in the moment. The downside is it's easy to avoid hard tasks indefinitely, and there's no built-in accountability. It might not make progress on long-term goals. Task-list approach can be built into routine-based approaches as well. I tend to use both because there's nothing greater than checking something off a list. Okay, sure, there probably is, but I mean, it's pretty high up there on the dopamine hit. For me, I have a list of quarterly things I need to do that I break down monthly, and then I will add tasks onto it as they come up. I'll usually write them in my daily planner and then add them to my overall things I need to do during the week. And then in my routines, I will take from my to-do list and then add them into the routine for the day. So like I can do these admin tasks. So like today I added in, okay, well today's a great day, I'm gonna go film a YouTube video. And so I do use both of these approaches. And it may sound kind of complicated, and it may be complicated for you, and in that case you don't need to do it this way, but it works really, really well for me. So the last planning method we are going to talk about is the chaos method. And what this is you just do things when they occur to you or when they become urgent. And this works well for people who are in survival mode, those so overwhelmed by any planning that it just creates more stress, and people with severe executive dysfunction, or people who are extremely demand avoidant. Sometimes this is all you can do, and that's okay. Surviving is accomplishing something. If you can't handle being told to do something, even by yourself, the chaos method may be the only way to get things done. The challenge is it's hard to make progress in long-term goals, and it can lead to crisis-driven work patterns. But if that's what works for you, that's okay. Or if it's what you need right now, and you can work towards a slightly more structured, flexible schedule, then that's fantastic. So the fourth dimension of planning is, what are you actually tracking? So let's talk about the different types of goals. So an outcome goal is, for example, publish a book by March 31st, or publish 3 books this year. And these tend to work for people motivated by end results, those with good executive functioning, or who can utilize planning as a tool for executive functioning, people who don't spiral when they miss goals. And all of these are kind of problems for neurodivergent brains. If you miss 1 week, you feel like you have failed. Then you give up entirely. All or nothing thinking makes outcome goals really dangerous. So there is another option, and they are called process goals. So this is like write 3 times per week or send a newsletter every 2 weeks. And this works well for people with inconsistent energy, those who aspire with outcome pressure, and people focus on building habits, or anyone with all or nothing thinking. And why it tends to work better is you're tracking the doing and not the result. So if you write 3 times 1 week and 1 time the next week, you've still made progress. There's flexibility built in. If you have a goal to write 30 minutes a day and you aren't able to write one day, you can reset the next day. Or if your goal is to write 3 times a week and you're only able to write 2 times, you can reset it the next week. There are plenty of times to start fresh, so you're not always feeling behind. And this is what I recommend for most neurodivergent writers. Focus on showing up and not the results. Another option is habit stacking, and this is attaching new habits to existing ones. And so like after I make coffee, I'm going to write for 15 minutes. After lunch, I do 10 minutes of editing. And this tends to work for people who forget to do things without triggers, those who thrive on routine, people who are trying to build new habits, and anyone with executive dysfunction around starting tasks. The existing habit becomes the reminder. You're not relying on willpower or memory. You're relying on sequence. You can also combine these. So I can use process goals, write 3 times per week within a routine structure, like my running routine, including 30-minute writing. And then also I do have some outcome goals, like publish a book in March. Goal setting is really hard for neurodivergent brains. So you may instinctively get up and go make morning coffee, and one day randomly that will no longer be an instinct. And so that is why, even though I use these methods, I still also have them written down very specifically in my daily pocket planner, so that when my brain does forget them, I have that backup on me at all times. Because the reality is, if you are neurodivergent, even if you have a habit, you could lose that habit at any time. And building up new habits is really, really difficult, if not almost impossible. And so that's not to discourage you from planning and having like a system in place. It's actually to encourage you to make sure your system accounts for the days where you're just going to forget everything that you normally do. So how do you find what works best for your brain? Well, first ask yourself what your specific challenges are. First, identify your specific challenges. Ask yourself, do I have time blindness? Well, then you might want to avoid rigid time blocking. Do I have energy fluctuations? Then you might need flexible structure. Do I have all or nothing thinking? You might want to avoid outcome-only goals. Do I forget things without reminders? Digital tools might be helpful, pocket notebook. Do you get overwhelmed by having too many options? You might need a simple system. Do I rebel against structure? Well, you might need a very flexible approach. Experiment without judgment. Try a system. A typical reframe is to give it 30 days, but that's more neurotypical advice. If the system stops working you before 30 days, then it's okay to pivot and try something else. If it doesn't work, that doesn't mean you failed. It means that system doesn't match your brain, and you get to try something else. Do make sure you're not spending excessive amounts of money before you try something else, because I know many of us have very limited incomes. Still what works, and dump what doesn't. You don't have to use any system exactly as designed. Take the parts that work, leave the parts that don't, and customize ruthlessly. I use so many different tools and strategies that I have meshed together over the years. Some people might say I overplan, but it works to keep me progressing. So I would say I plan enough for my needs, but your needs might be completely different. Be honest about your capacity. If you can only handle planning 1 week at a time right now, that's what you do. Don't force yourself into a system that's too much. Start small. You can always expand later. And this also can apply to the amount of work you expect yourself to do in a day, something I'm always guilty of. Accept that your needs might change or will change. The system that works in Q1 might not work in Q3, and that's okay. You're allowed to change systems. You're allowed to adjust. You're allowed to experiment. If you have ADHD, changing systems may be the key to keeping yourself planning long term. I want to be transparent. I created the Neurodivergent Quarterly Goal Planner because it worked for my brain. And here's what I needed. Quarterly a time frame, because an annual planner time frame was too long. I needed it in a paper format because I needed physical satisfaction, but I also created it so it can be used in a digital system that takes in PDFs. I needed routine-based structure because time blocking triggered my anxiety. I use a mix of processes and outcome goals because I needed that flexibility. I have brain dump pages because I needed to externalize ideas without the stress of having to implement them. I use task blocks instead of time blocks because of time blindness. And I couldn't find a planner that did all of that, so I made one. But here's the important part. My planner is not the solution. It is a solution. It works for my brain. I designed it in a way to hopefully work for most neurodivergent brains. And it might work for your brain too. And it's available at my website, mj-james.com, if you want to try it out. If it doesn't work for you, that is not a failure. That just means your brain needs something different. And that's completely valid. My quarterly planner is part of my system, but it's not my complete system. You might need to include monthly planning instead of, or in addition to quarterly planning. Use digital instead of paper. Use more structure or less structure. Have different goal tracking methods. All of that is okay. You do not have to use popular systems that everyone are talking about. So, some final thoughts. Planning should make your life easier, not harder. If a planning system creates more stress than it solves, that system isn't for you. So as you head into 2026, I encourage you to think about what your brain actually needs. Be willing to experiment. Dump systems that don't serve you. Customize without guilt. Whether you plan annually or quarterly or monthly or weekly or all of the above or not at all, you're still a valid, successful writer. What planning system works for your brain? Drop it in the comments. I'd love to hear what you found helpful. And if you found this video helpful, please give it a thumbs up and subscribe for more WriterTube content every Tuesday. I also host live writing sprints on Fridays from 6:30 to approximately 8:30 p.m. Mountain Time. Come write with me. If you want to support the channel, you can buy me a coffee. The link is below. Next week, we are talking about growth mindset versus fixed mindsets and how it impacts your writing journey. Happy writing and happy planning, whatever it looks like for you. And as always, keep reading, keep writing, and keep dreaming.